Okay then, so to Fulcher Rove and Sean and you, which you rally, Sean O'Carroll, you're all very welcome here to the graveside of Sean O'Carroll. Sean O'Carroll is on the Roll of Honour for the D Company, 2nd Battalion Belfast Brigade. But we've always wondered, where was the history? What's the background? So as part of this 50th anniversary of the Falls Commemoration Committee, that's when you started looking into the other volunteers who are represented on our Roll of Honour. Okay, so the Falls Commemoration Committee was set up in 1973 to care for the graves and to look after and keep alive the memory of the volunteers from the Falls. So basically you had two aims. One was commemoration and the other was education. Okay, so on the 50th anniversary, most of our commemorations would start off with this generation, our generation, who were involved in the conflict. So our generation would start with Charlie Hughes in March 1971. But if you look at the garden of remembrance on the Falls, there's other names that precede that, go back to the 1920s. You start off with Ned Trodden, who was basically the Falls Road barber, and that's roughly the site. Ned Trodden's barber shop is roughly the site where the garden is now on the Falls Road. But the second name on the D Company Roll of Honour is Sean O'Carroll. So today what we're talking about is to try to take that name, see the name in white on the monument, to try to take that name off the wall and then to try to humanise it, try to put a face to it, try to put a history to it, try to put a background to who Sean O'Carroll was. Because it was only when you start researching it that you realise that Sean O'Carroll lived in number 12 Gibson Street in the Falls. So his history starts, his family, his whole connections came from Gibson Street in the Falls. Sean was a fluent Irish speaker, Gaeilgeoir. So at that time in our history, Sean became active in both the Gaelic League and in the Irish Volunteers. He was active in D Company, the original D Company, in 1920 and the years previous to that. So he was the OC of D Company of his time and his day. And then, as part of his work as an Irish teacher, he was posted down to RD in County Louth, and that's where he was working. But then that's when he tied in with the local volunteers within the RD area, and he was an active volunteer with the local volunteers and with the local Irish language movement at that time. But then that's the time, 100 years ago, would have been 2020 would have been the 100th anniversary, where the Black and Tans come in and they assassinate volunteer Sean O'Carroll, along with another volunteer called Patrick Tierney. So what we're talking about today then is laying a wreath here at Sean's grave on behalf of the Falls Commemoration Committee and his friends and his comrades of this generation, because I don't think any of us would be standing here today. I mean, we would not be the Republicans we are today if it hadn't have been for volunteers like Sean O'Carroll or Patrick Tierney. So it's just as part of our remit, as part of our 50th anniversary commemoration, it's to actually take those ideals of education and commemoration Today, it's about looking at the O'Carroll family and the extended generations that have come down to us today, and basically humbly to say, could you tell us what type of person Séan O'Carroll was, what type of volunteer he was, and what happened 100 years ago in 1920 down at RD. So we're going to lay the wreath here. We're going to ask another Séan O'Carroll on behalf of the family to lay the wreath, and then we'll get into the minibus and we'll take ourselves down and meet the rest of the ones at the commemoration in RD then. Okay, so Gora Bina Bayogov, because it's important that we remember that Séan was also one of the pioneers of promoting the language. Do you know what I mean? When we say Cheer Gan Changa, Cheer Gan Anam, a country without a language is a country without a soul. That's what it meant to Séan O'Carroll in terms of his activism was as much about promoting the Irish language as it was about promoting the struggle for freedom and justice and an end to partition in our country.
Ardús ba Whitelam fáilte mór I gach aine a tháinig an seo aniu go háirithe na daoine a tháinig ó Belfast agus Cundamweo. We're here, as you know, just to commemorate Séan O'Carroll and Patrick Tierney, who was executed on the 30th November 1920. My first duty here today is to have a wreath laid at the monument on behalf of the family by Séan O'Carroll, behalf of the O'Carroll family. Our first speaker here today is Robert McClenaghan, who's going to say a few words on behalf of the Falls Commemoration Committee.
So, Gorbina Biogat, Pierce, August it's on our more too and Sean you, couple of folk are I can orchid shaw. So my name is Robert McClenaghan. So I'm part of the Falls Commemoration Committee who are here today. We've also got some of Séan O'Carroll's family down with us from Belfast. We've also got a couple of people from the Sinn Féin Common in Honorsonstown. Because in 1970, the actual Common was actually called the O'Carroll Tierney Sinn Féin Common. So there's been connections there between Belfast City and here. So our commemoration committee, the reason we're here today is it's our 50th anniversary. Falls Commemoration Committee was set up in 1973 to remember the volunteers from our generation who lost their lives and were killed during the conflict. The Commemoration Committee in the Falls built the Falls Commemoration Garden of Remembrance. And if you ever go till it, most of the volunteers who we would remember would start off from 1971 and come up to 1992. But Fra McCann, who's our chairperson of the Falls Commemoration Committee and former Sinn Féin MLA, he was meant to be given the oration today, but because of bad health, or ill health, he wasn't able to make it. But it was actually Fra's idea that we should go back and look at the other names before the start of this present phase of the conflict. Sean O'Carroll left Belfast and came to RD as an Irish language activist, but he was also a volunteer, both as his time in D Company, 2nd Battalion, Belfast Brigade in Belfast City. He was actually our officer commanding. He was the OC of his day in D Company. So that's why it's important for us to come here today, to lay a wreath, and to do that part of our remit, which is about education. And basically said Irish Republicans like myself, Irish Republicans who've travelled down here from Belfast City, would not be standing here today if it hadn't been for volunteers like Sean O'Carroll or Patrick Tierney. So it's actually an honour and a privilege to make that linkage, because Bacgailgore é freisin. So myself and Fra today, we'll be on the Board of Governors of the Falls Road Irish Language School. Our school on the Falls Road is Gael Scott and Lonan. And if you take that idea of Tír gan Changa is Tír gan Anam. In other words, a country without a language is a country without a soul. So that's what people like Sean O'Carroll were trying to instill in people of their generation. And that's what we're trying to instill in people in our generation today as well. So it's the same struggle, whether it was in 1920 or 1923. It was unfortunate we never got down here in 2020 for the 100th anniversary, but it's an absolute honour and a privilege to be here today. So Gormila Mayogov, Sine, Gormila.
I want to welcome you all here today. I know we have family members here, and some have travelled far to be here to honour and remember Sean O'Carroll and his comrade Patrick Tierney. Next Thursday marks the 103rd anniversary of the two men, and looking around here today, it is testament to their legacy and a credit to their families and comrades that their names live on and they'll never be forgotten. Their names are remembered in RD and surrounding area, and also in Belfast, thanks to the Falls Commemoration Committee, who are celebrating their 50th year in existence. It is imperative that commemoration committees like this are supported and encouraged to ensure the correct narrative is written into history and the stories of men like Sean and Patrick are told to future generations. It is an honour for me to be asked to speak here today and pay tribute to Sean and Patrick. Sean O'Carroll was a native of Selbridge, County Kildare. At an early age, his family went to live in Gibson Street in Belfast. He played a prominent part in organising the volunteers and became officer commanding of D Company. Sean was a fluent Gaelic speaker, and he came to RD with the dual role of organising the volunteers and teaching the Changa. He boarded in a house just down the road from here with Mrs. Lynch, and it's from this house that he was taken by the Black and Tans on the 30th November 1920. Patrick Tierney came from Tisdale Street where he resided with his family and worked locally as a butcher. His role in the volunteers was to look after armaments. To give a short bit of history of the Ireland Séan and Patrick were living in, Republicans throughout the area were out electioneering in the most significant election that ever took place in this country, with Sinn Féin electing 73 TDs in the general election of the 14th of December 1918, including the election of John J. Kelly in this county of Louth. It was the first general election that allowed women over the age of 30 and all men over the age of 21 to vote. The Sinn Féin team of TDs refused to take their seats in Westminster and met in the Oval Room in the Mansion House, that is, those who are not in prison. They refused to recognise the Parliament of the United Kingdom and established Dáil Éireann. On the same day that the first Dáil met, the 21st of January 1919, 2 RIC men were executed by the IRA in Solihull Beg in County Tipperary, signalling the commencement of the Tan War. The Black and Tans was the brainchild of Winston Churchill, the British Secretary of War. Their role in Ireland was to terrorise citizens in an attempt to weaken support for the IRA, and residents of this area and throughout the country were in fear of their lives and the Black and Tans, driving around the countryside in their lorries, pointing weapons and firing at citizens. In September 1920, the local volunteers put a plan in place to capture RIC barracks. Sean O'Carroll had been in touch with an RIC man by the name of Grant, who expressed the willingness to assist the volunteers in the raid on the barracks. On the day of the planned raid, the operation was called out by the battalion OC. This fiasco had a demoralisation effect on the volunteers in RD. A leakage of information about the proposed plan had put the operation in danger, and Sean was connected to the plan. 10 days before the murder of Sean and Patrick, a scuffle broke out in RD barracks between a number of Black and Tans, resulting in one of them being admitted to hospital with a gunshot wound to his thigh, an example of the lack of discipline they were known for. On the night of the 30th November 1920, the Black and Tans entered RD from the Drogheda direction and called to the house where Sean was boarding. They took Sean from the house and informed his landlady, Mrs. Lynch, to bring tea down for him in the barracks. Some time later, shots were heard and Sean's body was discovered riddled with bullets in a laneway leading down to the train station. Sean was 25 years of age. That same night, the Black and Tans called to the home of the Tierney family in Tisdale Street, now renamed Tierney Street. They took 2 of their sons, Patrick and Martin, from the house. They escorted Martin back to the house and ordered him not to come out or he would be shot. A while later, shots were heard and Patrick's body was discovered with bullet wounds to his head. His arms and legs were broken and he'd been bayoneted. Patrick was 26 years of age. Patrick is buried in Ballapoosta graveyard up this road here, and Sean was taken by his comrades to Milltown Cemetery in Belfast, where I had the honour of laying a wreath after his centenary. We weren't able to do much for the centenary because of the COVID restrictions, but we put together a video which I hope you have all seen by now. It told the story of Sean and Patrick, and we visited different places of interest in relation to them. But it will be a year before I got to Belfast to lay the wreath on Sean's grave. Sean O'Carroll and Patrick Tierney's name are now synonymous with RD. Their names are spoken of daily in the town, with them having 2 streets named after them. This monument we are standing at was erected in 1955 and originally was stood across the road, but was moved to this spot to facilitate the building of the chapel. It is a fine monument, but the only fitting tribute to Séan and Patrick will be the complete eradication of the British presence from this country, and we establish a true republic as laid out in the proclamation. Cora Mila Mahigod.